The ground you are standing on has no physical substance. That is the opening premise of the Yoga-vasistha, an ancient Hindu philosophical text that views the entire earth as, quote, a completely false illusion, much like a river in a desert mirage. The sage Vasistha, the narrator of this text, is not speaking in poetic metaphors about the fleeting nature of time or the fragility of human life. He is making a strict, literal claim about the architecture of reality. The physical world is an absolute zero. To him, the universe is what he calls an aerial castle. It is a highly detailed, immersive city constructed entirely within the bounds of imagination, floating in empty space. This concept forms the core of Advaita-vedanta, a philosophical framework built on absolute non-duality. In this system, there is no separation between the creator, the observer, and the observed. Only a single unified consciousness exists. If we accept this premise, that the material world has a mass of exactly zero, then we face an immediate problem. Every single piece of data reported by human senses, the weight of a stone, the heat of a fire, the color of the sky, is entirely untrustworthy. If external matter does not exist, we are left to account for the dense, inescapable reality we experience every single day. The Yoga-vasistha redefines human cognition, modeling the mind not as a passive camera recording a pre-existing world, but as a relentless engine of projection. Vasistha describes the objects around us as unengraven images on the column of the mind. They are pictures that have no external source material. The mind paints them onto itself. It builds a highly convincing facsimile out of a negative notion. It takes the absence of physical substance and fills it with intricate fabricated detail. The cognitive error occurs when we look at this internal, self-generated projection and mistake it for hard external matter. What we call reality, then, is an epistemological projection. It is an active, continuous distortion created by our own cognitive architecture, a theater from which we cannot simply step out. Vasistha relies on physical metaphors. As this animated diagram shows, cognitive projection mimics optical distortion. Sunbeams underwater refract in the dense liquid, bending light to create a false perception. The eye registers a glowing point beneath the surface that does not physically exist. The same principle governs desert mirages, where manipulated light paints a true-feeling oasis. Then the text shifts to scale. A microscopic atom appears as a massive hill. By exponentially scaling up tiny data, the mind creates a mountain out of a speck. The human intellect acts as this microscope. It artificially inflates the bulk of tiny, insignificant phenomena, rendering them as massive, insurmountable physical realities that dominate our attention. Whether it is bending light like a lens or inflating scale like a microscope, the intellect relies on specific mechanical distortions to engineer a solid world out of sheer nothingness. But the human mind is only the micromechanism. To understand the origin of this illusion, the Yoga-vasistha scales up to the macro model of the universe, the supreme intellect, or Brahma. The text envisions this supreme intellect as a vast, perfectly calm, infinite body of water. When that calm spirit suddenly churns, it generates surface turbulence. The visible, everyday objects that we interact with, our bodies, cities, and landscapes, are merely the intermotions, the rising waves on this infinite ocean. As these waves crest and crash, they pour out a massive variety of physical forms. Vasistha categorizes this output as pearls, shells, and sea froth. A heavy pearl, a brittle shell, and a bubble of froth have radically different physical properties, yet ontologically they are identical. They are all composed of the exact same underlying water. The incredible multiformity of our world, the variety of people, planets, and elements, is nothing more than temporary surface turbulence rippling across a singular, unified consciousness. Accepting this theory requires breaking through a deeply ingrained philosophical assumption, the Cartesian belief that mind and matter are two entirely distinct, incompatible substances. Verse 13 aggressively dismantles this binary, setting up traditional opposites. On one side, a plenum, a space packed so densely with solid matter that nothing else can enter. On the other, a vacuum, an entirely empty void containing no physical substance at all. Vasistha dismisses defining the universe as solid matter or empty space, calling both terms inane as airy breath. The sensible soul and the insensible world are not opposites. They are simply two reverse views of the exact same underlying intellect. The universe does not rest on a foundation of atoms or physical laws. It exists solely as a tiny particle suspended within the infinite spirit of God. By treating reality this way, Advaita-vedanta bypasses the hard problem of consciousness. It doesn't need to explain how inert matter generates a thinking mind, because the inert matter never existed in the first place. The philosophical argument reaches its terminal point. The universe is entirely hollow. It is as transparent as the sky, possessing no solidity at all. But having annihilated the physical world, Vasistha abruptly introduces a hyper-detailed narrative about a human kingdom. He introduces Prince Padma, a ruler deeply entrenched in the material world. He enforces strict geopolitical boundaries, relentlessly pursues prosperity, and destroys his adversaries in warfare. Vasistha then describes Queen Leela using dense, overwhelming sensory details. We hear about her lotus-white face, the painted spots of her decoration, and her intense emotional response to the shifting moods of her husband. Why would a text dedicated to proving that reality is an empty void suddenly drop its reader into the center of a dense, politically and emotionally complex human kingdom? The story of Padma and Leela is the city in a dream that Vasistha described earlier. Their kingdom is the testing ground for the philosophy. The intricate politics, the warfare, and the romantic attachments in their story represent the complex, finer illusion of human existence. The painted spots on the queen's face and the violent destruction of the prince's enemies are the froth and shells rising on the surface of that supreme, unified ocean. Advaita-vedanta does not demand that we close our eyes and pretend the physical world isn't happening to us. Instead, the text demands that we learn to navigate the dense mirage of daily duties, relationships, and conflicts without being tricked by their false solidity. The highest intellectual achievement is not to escape the illusion. It is to engage fully with the intense, substantive mirage of earthly life, while maintaining the unbroken awareness that you are walking through an empty reflection.